Welcome back to the Bill and Doug Show outside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, a special edition. Brian Hartline has been hired as the head coach at South Florida University. Bill, you and I were doing a show for our Substack subscribers on Wednesday morning when that news broke. We talked about it for 20 minutes on the Substack show, but now we're bringing it to our audience here on YouTube and on the podcast feeds, and we're saying this stuff at the beginning so it's not confusing.
Yeah, well, also, we have since spoken with Ryan Day about the news as well. I think the biggest thing coming out of that is that Brian Hartline will be staying with the team for the duration of the season. Details of that still a little fuzzy. I did ask Ryan Day specifically, does that mean you're going to take on more play calling responsibility? And he sort of said, we're still working through that. But I think the biggest thing, in addition to the recruiting that is happening on Wednesday that people are wondering, is whether or not Brian Hartline will be here for however much longer Ohio State's season is, and the answer is that he will be.
And this is something that has happened before when Ohio State won the national championship in 2014. Tom Herman got the Houston head coaching job, stayed with them through the national championship run. They won it all. A very similar comparison here. That's an offensive play caller that stuck around and balanced. You have two jobs for a month. You're nuts individually, but you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little more stretched out because it really could be you have two jobs for almost 2 months now with the way that this plays out. There will be a lot on Brian Hartline's plate, a lot for him to deal with, but he will still be involved with Ohio State's chase for a second national title.
As Ryan Day said on Wednesday, the timing isn't great, but that's not Brian's fault. It's other people's fault, and it is the fault of the calendar and the way this works, and Ryan doesn't love it, but...
Yeah, but coaches got hired in December before the calendar changed, so yes and no.
It doesn't happen in the NFL, right?
I think he was bemoaning more the fact that it was happening on signing day than he was the fact that it was happening at all.
Okay. So that is happening. It is a little complicated. The play calling aspect of it is interesting because we always kind of think that Ryan Day gets a little more involved. Since he's given up play calling duties, he gets more involved in the postseason anyway because there is more time in general. And so that might have happened anyway, but if Brian Hartline wasn't leaving, it might be I want to Bigfoot Brian Hartline because I gave him the job. But now it's you can Bigfoot him because he's got to. If Ryan Day can probably take back as much as he wants, at least in the preparation, because Brian Hartline has a million things going on.
He was going to do it anyway. I actually think this has almost little to no impact on the 2025 Ohio State Buckeyes. Because Ryan Day, as he said last year, once the recruiting stuff died down and some of his CEO responsibilities were kind of stripped away for a little bit, he could be more about ball in the postseason, and he loved it. And he was definitely going to do that this time around. It's more important, I guess, this time around, but I actually think sort of the mechanisms to account for this change with Brian Hartline were sort of already going to be in place anyway. The questions for this are more about next year, who replaces him, the recruiting aspect, all that. I don't know that this does anything really to alter Ohio State's chances of winning a national title this year.
We do think this. You have been talking about this South Florida opportunity, sort of vaguely, sort of generally, a job like South Florida. And then as soon as it opened up, you kind of like Brian Hartline in South Florida as a pair.
Yeah, I think it makes a ton of sense. Obviously, he recruits really well down in the state of Florida. Ohio State always has, but Brian Hartline especially has been very good at that. It's a good program in its conference. They're opening a new stadium in 2 seasons. They want to be good. They don't want to be a bad team when that happens. They're invested. Their previous head coach just got the Auburn job. There are a lot of reasons why I think it makes sense for Brian Hartline to take this job. Frankly, I didn't think it made a lot of sense for some of the other jobs he was talked about for, whether that's Kentucky or Penn State, which always felt like a bit of a pie in the sky thing anyway. But this job, although it is Group of 5 and not power conference level, I do think is the kind of job that can be a stepping stone to something bigger for him.
All right, we had a 20-minute conversation about this as the news broke. We'll give that to you guys now. We'll then come back at the end and talk a little bit more about the recruiting perspective, what Mark Pantoni, Ohio State's recruiting director, had to say about this. For now, thanks for being here on the Bill and Doug Show. Again, if you want to be a Substack subscriber, our Substack subscribers already got this conversation. They get extra stuff from us. You can do that by joining us at billanddougosu.substack.com. Here's the conversation right after the news broke on Wednesday morning. What does this mean for Ohio State? Do we expect a significant drop-off in their recruiting, development, and level of play at receiver if Brian Hartline's not the guy leading the room?
I don't know that I'd say significant drop-off. Yeah. I think just to be fair about it and give credit to Brian Hartline and what he's done, to assume that it's going to be exactly the same with no hiccups would be probably a little foolish. So Yeah, it might take a momentary dip, but then I think Ohio State can build it back up, right? So I'm not suddenly worried for Ohio State's future because Brian Hartline is no longer here. He's an excellent coach. He's a great recruiter. He's an incredible developer of receivers. Ohio State has been Ohio State for a long time. I don't think that this changes because they're losing Brian Hartline.
This is maybe and it's just because he is the best position coach in America. So I would say this is
at a position that has been fundamental to Ohio State's rise under Ryan Day. Yeah.
So that this I would say maybe is like the biggest position coach loss that Ohio State has experienced that I can think of. I don't know that that's too much to say.
Yeah,
but
no, that's probably true. Yeah.
I think you can say that and also say I don't think it destroys Ohio State because I'll go back, right? Assistant coaches are middle managers. It's the head coach and it's the players. Now, when the assistant coach is primarily responsible for the type of players you bring in and then how you develop them, that's hugely important. But this does not mean that Ohio State won't be able to recruit receivers anymore. Receivers, and again, that's why I asked Marvin Harrison Jr. about it several years ago at Big Ten Media Days, and he's like, why do you come here? And he mentioned Ryan Day, the Ryan Day offense. That still remains attractive, I think, to receivers. And so that ability to recruit quarterbacks who are accurate and throw the ball and give receivers an opportunity to make great plays, and then those receivers make the quarterbacks look great, like the symbiotic relationship between those. Ryan Day is still a huge part of that, even though Brian Hartline was obviously a huge part of that. I wonder, part of me wonders immediately, would Keenan Bailey go with Brian Hartline to maybe be like his offensive coordinator? Or would Keenan Bailey stay here potentially as the new receivers coach with elevated play calling status? I don't know if that would be required to keep Keenan Bailey around. Ryan Day loves Keenan Bailey, but Keenan Bailey is also very tight with Brian Hartline, right? I do think whether or not Bailey is retained or whether he goes with Hartline is a little bit part of this conversation. It's not the primary part, but I'm curious about it.
It would be a heck of a thing for Brian Hartline, who has 1 year as a play caller, to go take his first head coaching job and then make his OC a guy who's never called plays before. I don't know that I'm as worried about that as
if it's not that, then Keenan wouldn't go. Then Bailey wouldn't go if he's not getting an elevation, right? So So then, do you think there's a good chance that Keenan Bailey becomes a receivers coach, or do you think Devin Jordan gets elevated? Do you think they go outside?
People have asked this question of me a couple times because we were talking about Hartline at Penn State and Hartline generally just leaving. Who would be receivers coach? My answer has always been Keenan Bailey. Okay. I think he has coached every position on the offense except for offensive line. And I think he is highly thought of both as an on-field coach and a recruiter by Ryan Day, that he would be the guy tapped to step into those shoes. Yes. And then they would have to find a new tight ends coach, obviously, to replace Keenan Bailey, and then a new play caller. I don't think Ohio State's next play caller is on the staff.
I agree with that. And so, but now there's also kind of there's no limits on anything. So if you want to, you can go get a play caller who just calls plays. You don't have to try to find
I wonder if one's available.
Do you think that could happen? Obviously, you're referencing Chip Kelly. Do you think that could actually happen?
Yeah. I mean, and that's not me reporting anything, but logically, sure. Unless I don't think Ryan Day secretly hates Chip Kelly's guts or anything like that. So, yes. As if Chip wants to, Chip's in his 60s, right? Chip is older than you think he is. Maybe he wants to take the money that Mark Davis gave him and go sip umbrella drinks. I wouldn't blame him. But yeah, that would be I think the logical guy. Whether that's come in now at the postseason and help out and then transition back to that role, or just wait for this to play. I'm again, we're learning this on the fly. I'm assuming Brian Hartline is going to stay with Ohio State through the postseason. But because it's a heck of a promotional, it's Tom Herman. Tom Herman got his photo taken on the field after winning a national championship wearing Houston gear. You know who wants to do that? Brian Hartline. So I don't know that this does anything to impact Ohio State's next month and a half, other than maybe some recruiting stuff with this current class. But then when they're looking for a play caller after the season, I think Chip is probably the first name on everyone's list.
Okay. So on a scale of 1 to 100, 100 is absolute devastation for Ohio State. 1 is they're fine. What does losing Brian Hartline? What would you rate it right now?
49.
Because I think if you're rolling, it should be impossible to be above 50. That I don't think if you're rolling and you have a culture and a head coach and resources, I don't think losing any assistant should be more than a 50. And then this is butting up like right up against that limit. So I think I'm with you. Like it's right, like in the 40s probably. But this is what we talked about again with the Ryan Day. And I was just on a radio show yesterday talking about this, that to me, at least my perspective has changed. A year ago, Jim Knowles and Chip Kelly were viewed as the best were viewed as the best coordinator combo in the country. Yes? Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles.
Yeah,
Up there.
They were.
Top
Yeah.
three. Yeah.
I think people would probably do revisionist history and say no, but at the time, yeah, it felt like it.
And primarily important to Ohio State's success. And they left, and Chip Kelly got fired, didn't even make it a season in the NFL, and Jim Knowles oversaw the collapse of Penn State as a program. So, not that it's all Jim Knowles' fault, but it's probably his fault. If that defense had stopped UCLA, James Franklin probably has a job. So,
yeah,
people thought they were excellent, and they left, and it felt like a big loss, and then they both failed this year. That doesn't mean they are failures. They failed at their jobs this year. And guess what? They promoted Brian Hartline and they brought in Matt Patricia, who nobody was looking to hire, and they're better as a program. I don't know if they're better at the coordinator spot specifically, who knows, but they're better as a program. So I think I am kind of going to be, it doesn't mean that Ryan Day is above criticism, but I will view any Ryan Day hire with more of an eye toward, well, I don't know, guy probably knows what he's doing. And so this is Saban-esque. Coordinators run through your program. Now, Kirby was there for a long time with Nick Saban, but other than that, coordinators run through and the ship keeps sailing. So I think that should be the assumption probably now with Ryan Day until proven otherwise. Yes?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's earned that benefit of the doubt. Clearly had to learn some stuff and
yes,
took some L's right on staff hires that did impact Ohio State negatively. But I do really feel like he's kind of learned from that and is in a much better spot when it comes to building a staff. So like anything, of course it could go sideways. But I trust it. I think. Not to say like you said he's above criticism, or we're just going to go along with everything he does and tell you it's great. But I give him a chance to show you what he wants to do with it first, I think, before you just assume it's going to go poorly.
And really, I mean, again, no offense to Brian Hartline, but as a play caller, he's replaceable, right? He's new
eminently replaceable as a play caller. Yes.
As a receivers coach, he's perhaps irreplaceable, but you have to replace him anyway. It's not your choice. And so I think it feels like Ohio State has done everything it can to keep Brian Hartline. We don't know the specifics of this. We don't know the money situation, but they did give him the promotion right after it didn't go well a couple years ago. They go back to it now. They did that. We don't know the specifics of I
bet he's not getting a huge raise. I looked it up the other day. Alex Golesh is making 2.5. Hartline makes 2.
Okay.
So maybe Hartline's making 3.
And I certainly had been theorizing, does he just want to stay until he gets the perfect job? Does he want to stay at Ohio State and be the coordinator and the receivers coach until he gets offered one of the 10 best jobs in the country? I thought that would have been a reasonable choice, and maybe he wanted that as an alum of Ohio State. And South Florida is not one of the 10 best jobs in the country, but obviously that's not what he wanted. He thinks he's ready to go be a head coach. And
he needs to learn how to be a head coach, and South Florida affords him that opportunity while giving him a great opportunity to win. He can get his teeth kicked in at Auburn if he wants to. But I think this is a great. I don't know if he's going to be a good head coach, but if he's going to be a good head coach, this is the place where you go first to be successful.
And if he is good there, and he played with the Dolphins for a while, he's got, and he has Florida recruiting roots. If he does,
South Florida misnomer, by the way, in Tampa. Don't know why.
Yeah, that's true. That is weird. If he does well at South Florida for a year or two, I think he potentially positions himself as the number one candidate for the next opening at Miami, Florida State, or Florida. and Mike Norvell is on the hottest of hot seats at Florida State. Florida just not hired a new coach in John Summerall, but we have no idea how that's going to go. And Mario Cristobal keeps gathering talent and like kind of screwing it up during the regular season. So the idea that, I mean, one of those three jobs is going to come open in the next 3 years. No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
Yep.
And if Brian Hartline is sitting in South Florida going 10-2 and making the playoff, they're going to be banging down his door.
I don't think he has to make the playoff. Just, I mean, obviously, if you win the American, you're more than likely to. But like Alex Golesh is in the playoff. Alex Golesh went 9-3 this year.
The SEC hired 3 American coaches.
Yeah,
and the Big 12 hired 1. Like the 4 best coaches in the American this year all got jobs in the Power 4.
Yes, I think when it comes to the SEC hiring group of 6 coaches, they care less about actually how much you've won and lost, and more about how well you recruit to those places.
Yeah. So again, like that's a Brian Hartline conversation for Ohio State fans. This is an Ohio State conversation. And I just don't ever think you can it's not worth it to overreact to assistant coach moves, because there have been too many guys that people have thought, and of course it goes wrong when they did a terrible job replacing Tom Herman and it hurt them in 15. I think it's possible if Tom Herman was the offensive coordinator in 15, they would have repeated among all the other things, but it's because they made a horrendous hire. Right. So is it like, oh, assistant coaches don't matter? It's like assistant coaches don't matter if you don't make a horrendous hire. Tim Beck was a horrendous hire. Promoting Ed Warner was a horrendous decision. There are many people out there as a play caller that you can get. And then you cannot get somebody to be the receivers coach who will be as good as Brian Hartline. It's impossible. You can't do it. But can you get somebody who's pretty darn good? Yes, you can. You're Ohio State. And maybe that guy's in your building. Maybe he's not. So there's going to be a drop-off, but it does not have to be devastating if you make the right hire. And that's why Ryan Day, part of the reason why he makes the big money. And he's proven with the last couple hires that he's gotten much better at this.
Yeah.
So there have been too many times we thought Kerry Combs was like the end-all be-all in terms of a recruiter and a cornerback developer, right? And then obviously he wasn't a good defensive coordinator, but we thought Kerry Combs was an elite position coach. Did we not?
Yeah,
we did,
of course.
And when he left the first time and got replaced by Taylor Johnson, like it didn't go so well, but it's because it wasn't a good hire. And then when he left the second, it did go terribly. And then when he came back, and then when he got replaced again, he got replaced by Tim Walton. We didn't know who Tim Walton was. Guess what? Tim Walton is awesome. So nobody's pining for Kerry Combs now. So when Kerry Combs was replaced by a bad hire, you really miss Kerry Combs. When Kerry Combs was replaced by a great hire, Tim Walton is awesome. So that's the point. When you're at Ohio State, you always have the opportunity to make a great hire. You just have to make it. It's not a guarantee, but you can't. It just doesn't serve any purpose to walk around and think, well, I thought Ohio State was going to win 3 of the next 5 national championships, but now that Brian Hartline left, it's not going to happen. There's no reason to think like that.
Do you know who's a receivers coach and a pretty good play caller? Mike Shanahan at Indiana.
Okay. Also, by the way, not above stealing.
Just saying.
Like Urban Meyer got to Ohio State and just took like Indiana's coaching staff, or excuse me, Notre Dame's coaching staff, right?
Yeah.
It was like, you don't sometimes you don't have to be a genius. And it's like, oh, Jim Knowles was like the hottest guy in the market. So it's like, maybe you don't need to do that, but you can just look around at the good people around you. Mike Shanahan is really good.
I don't know. Like, I'm just trying to think, like, I do think what will happen here is that Ryan Day will go find a new play caller and move Keenan Bailey to receivers coach. But just like trying to think of like guys around the country who were good receivers coaches. Jamarcus Shepard at Alabama, very good, but he just got the Oregon State head coaching job. Yeah. I think Ross Douglas at Oregon is like a younger guy, kind of on the up, but he seems like he's got some juice, and he's from Ohio.
He's from Ohio.
Played at Michigan, I think. Is that right? He's from Avon, I believe, and played at Michigan. 31 years old from Avon.
And this is one of the goes again, like Oregon is losing both its coordinators because their DC's taking the Cal job and their OC's taking the Kentucky job. So like this is what happens. Like when you get to the spot where nobody wants your assistance, then you're in trouble. So I do think maybe we looked at Hartline a little differently because he's an alum, because he has NFL money. He doesn't have to chase. But I think your point which is very astute, would be like, this isn't chasing. This is a strategic move, and makes a lot of sense in a lot of different ways that you've been spelling out again for months.
It's just like I said, too much of it lines up, right? I think, and we don't have to restate it. People know why. So I'm not surprised at all that this is happening. Once it wasn't really reported, I guess, like at all, but like once Golish left, I was like, I think Hartline's going to go there. So not surprised. It'd be interested to see what happens with this recruiting class. That's like the immediate concern, I guess. But I don't know that there is like a high level of concern beyond that.
And listen, this is just, you just have to be realistic about this. I do think like people are going crazy about the Penn State stuff and they're losing this recruiting class and stuff. You just can't ever make any decision based on the single recruiting class. When there's change, you're going to get screwed up in recruiting for a year. You're making a long-term hire. If Ohio State loses a couple guys in this recruiting class, they're going to give $1 million to Nick Marsh from Michigan State, who's in the transfer portal. Like they haven't done that, but if that's what they need to do to patch this together because of maybe the lack of development with a couple guys that we've talked about this year, and maybe if for whatever reason it doesn't go well on Wednesday, they'll just go in the portal and fix it. Because guess like who would want to come here? Great receivers. And guess what Ohio State would do
in this offense? Yeah.
They will pay to go get great receivers. So like,
I don't think Jeremiah Smith's going anywhere. You want to play next to Jeremiah Smith and take advantage of all that gravity?
Yeah. You don't think Jeremiah Smith's following Brian Hartline to South Florida?
Not unless it's to train and not play college football.
So listen, here's the other thing too. Like, if that was Brian Hartline's last great act, and maybe it's signing this class today, who knows, but Brian Hartline got Jeremiah Smith here. Like he stayed. It's always like one of those things, like I was put on this earth right to do something. What was Brian Hartline put on this earth to do? Get the number one receiver recruit in the country, who's maybe the best receiver prospect that anybody has seen, get him to go to Ohio State instead of Miami. And Brian Hartline did it, and the result was national championship, shot at a national championship. I mean, what if Jeremiah Smith, like he's the best player in the sport at his position, and he's incredibly impactful on winning and helping Ohio State win natties. Like Ohio State, Buckeye Nation, that's a thank you, Brian Hartline. Best of luck. And maybe the next time there's a Jeremiah Smith, maybe they won't get him. Maybe they won't. But they'll get other really good players. So you just best of luck to Brian Hartline. And you like the move for him. And Ohio State it'll be very interesting to monitor. But they have a guy in-house. Ryan Day, I've criticized hiring the guy down the hall in the past. I don't think Keenan Bailey is just a guy down the hall. And Keenan Bailey, when he got here, did extra things, did things above and beyond, showed some intuition for the game, showed some go-gettedness, and impressed Ryan Day, and worked and earned and has learned from Brian Hartline. And I think if that's what happened, would be very prepared for this. And it is a guy who is taking advantage of an opportunity, not we're just taking and promote him because he's familiar. That's my view.
That's kind of my view on him too. I actually think he's done a pretty good job with the tight end room, recruiting certainly. But I think like you've seen that room to develop over the course of the year. It's been an incredibly important position group for Ohio State. So like that, I would find that encouraging. And if you're just talking about like he's sliding over to receivers coach, and maybe whatever, you give him passing game coordinator title or something like that. As long as he's not the play caller, I'm cool with it. And I don't think they would do that. I don't think that's what would happen. So I think it would make sense. And then you backfill at tight end. They have a guy on staff, actually, Wendy Laurent, who's the assistant tight ends coach that they hired this offseason, who was the tight ends coach at Dartmouth, and was a GA at Penn State. He's a former Penn State player. And I do think tight ends coach is probably a position where you can like cut your teeth a little bit. So I wonder maybe if they could do that, or they go out and whatever, find somebody else. I don't know. I think that's probably the least concern for people, is figuring out who the next tight ends coach would be if Keenan Bailey slides over. But I do think that's where it'll go, if I had to guess. Okay. And then the search will be on for a play caller.
So that was the conversation as it happened. Bill, now obviously from a recruiting perspective, as we talked about, Brian Hartline, great at it. Specifically, Ohio State had 5 receivers into the class, verbally committed coming into Wednesday. 1 is already flipped out. That happened quickly. 2 signed as we record this, and the Buckeyes waiting on 2 as we record this. It's an interesting situation here.
Yeah, the 2 we're waiting on, Chris Henry Jr., the top receiver in the country, and Jaquaden Guilford, who is not as highly ranked, but still a very, very good player, a player that Ohio State is very high on. All 3 of the guys, the one you alluded to who flipped, Caden Dixon-Wyatt, Chris Henry Jr., and Jaquaden Guilford, have all been like rumored to be at least a little flimsy in their commitments in like the past few days, even before we knew any of this stuff was happening. With Brian Hartline, LSU involved with Guilford, Oregon and USC involved with Dixon-Wyatt, and Chris Henry Jr., USC being the school that did flip Caden Dixon-Wyatt. So this just sort of like exacerbated a thing that I think Ohio State was already sort of trying to navigate, but obviously becomes much more difficult now. And it speaks to Brian Hartline's influence as a recruiter, right? Brian Hartline leaves on signing day, and they have a couple of 5-star-ish guys they're waiting on. I don't think anybody's surprised that maybe those guys are waffling a little bit, but we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, and Mark Pantoni, the recruiting guru, made it clear in this day and age, there used to be sort of like area recruiters where you'd have states and regions and cities where you made connections, and then you also recruited your position. He said it's basically all position coaches anymore.
Yeah.
So Brian Hartline is the guy who recruits the receivers, but he said they want to make sure that every recruit builds relationships with the coordinators, with the head coach, in case something like this happens. Ryan Day said on Wednesday that it's his job to hire the best in the country, and that will be their goal. But obviously, Mark Pantoni said that the position coach is the point guy on this.
Yeah.
And when it comes to that, Brian Hartline has been as good as anybody in the country. This obviously will have some effect. It has a great effect on Ohio State today, but in recruiting receivers going forward, and we talked about it already, it's going to have some effect.
Yeah, I think it'll be sort of, it'll be first come down to what Ryan Day decides to do, obviously. But then, you might need some help from a guy like Jeremiah Smith, right? Like sort of stamping whoever that next coach is. We don't think Jeremiah is going anywhere. He's got 1 more year of college ball left. So, if he gives this endorsement to that guy, I think that would resonate with a lot of future high school players. It was interesting to me that Mark Pantoni said something and Ryan Day said something, both sort of unprovoked, or at the very least, things they didn't have to say in the answers to the questions they were asked. Ryan Day said Ohio State is bigger than anybody. That's expressed to him by Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer when he took this job, that Ohio State was good before Ryan Day took the job, and it'll be good after he leaves. And then Mark Pantoni said that I'm sure Ryan Day has 50 missed calls from some of the best receiver coaches in the country waiting to step in and fill Brian Hartline's shoes. So they're very much trying to get out in front of the fact that, yes, we're losing the best receivers coach in the country, but whoever they go get now, they think is going to be the next best receivers coach in the country.
If you're watching here on YouTube, sorry the video's shaking a little bit. My arm is getting really tired. That's going to wrap it up. Thanks for joining us here, this emergency version on YouTube and podcast feeds of Brian Hartline going to South Florida. You know where to find us. We'll keep covering this team. There's a lot going on, and we couldn't be happier to have so much to talk about. He's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Maurice, and that was the Bill and Doug Show.